From Italy, but in fact, I come from many parts of the world. And the first things I want to say that a lot of things that we will do today is due, and I have to be thankful to my Vietnamese comrade, my friends. I spent many, many years in Vietnam. And I mean, I'm in debt from the tradition of Vietnamese women, Vietnamese fighting women, from which I learned a lot of things that I'm going to share with you and trying to, use another approach to the practice of what is generally called self-defense. And as I was saying before, we are not going to do a self-defense class. That is. Why? But we are going to fight as women. That is, to fight in the most powerful and effective way we could have in our life. That is the result of long years of research that I conduct, not only as academic and as an activist, but also as a practitioner of martial arts and a researcher on fighting system, bodily fighting system developed by women and feminized subjectivities in many parts of the world, starting from Southeast Asia and then moving abroad and meeting fantastic women, among which I can list who are here now and present. And so from this experience, I realized that there is another story, an untold story that tells something very different about what is to fight. But when I say to fight, I include also physical fight. It's not something that I divide, but there is another approach, another story that has not been completely told since recent time, at least in the country where I was raised when I was a child, that is Italy, in which in that time I learned that bodies are divided into two. Unfortunately, Western culture is all about dividing in two, and every time giving this kind of classification. But in these only two, too many things drops out, and too many things are left aside that we cannot completely understand. And in my culture, in this, as it's said in Latin, divide et impera, that means to divide is to conquer, is to control. This idea divided bodies into two parts, weak bodies and strong bodies. Strong bodies has the right to oppress. And on the other side, the so-called positive side of the coin, to protect. But that is a monopoly. Weak bodies are deemed to be oppressed and are also forced to this realm of caring. Why I'm saying forced? Because if it's not a choice, it's something that you are just forced to be. Notwithstanding what do you really think about yourself, notwithstanding your own experiences. So in this idea, at a certain point, it bumped to my mind the idea that this monopoly creates a sort of double blocked to the idea of and the possibility of a fighting force be developed by so-called weak bodies. That is, in this case, we intend force and strength just in one way, in one single way, that is the way that patriarchal cultures, at least in the West, developed as a form of control. And this idea is strength is all about oppressing. And if we let's try this exercise. Stop to think about ourselves as we think, and sorry for extending this us, from such beautiful and fantastic culture in which ideas of body are completely different. So sorry for extending this. I'm just starting from myself as I was taught by the feminist discourse and trying to see what resonates in you. So just keep this part and say, no, to me it's different. And I really do hope that in the last part of this hour that we have together, you can share also your different positions about this. So in this idea of the strength is always about expressing. So I use the use of force. It has one direction. So let's try to think about our bodies, you say, as territories. And coming from the experience of Vietnamese culture, I was taught by my masters to start to think about myself as a garden. As an inner garden in which I have rivers, mountain, whatever, and also I meet some people that tells me to see my body as a kind of mirror of the outer space and the other way around. And this garden is composed by unnumberable different forces. And to be strong means to build a balance among all these kind of forces, exactly like an ecosystem. That is the kind of strength that is used in this kind of conception. The other way, the patriarchal approach to strength and combat is all the strength has, just one direction. Can you figure it out? Which direction is it? Yes, this, but if I have to think about a force, a physical force, is pushing down and limiting, shrinking. This kind of force is exactly what a great philosopher, her name was Simone Weil, said it is the destiny of culture that leads to war. So, and in which these forces are unstoppable. And another great philosopher, Italian philosopher, Carlo Alonzi, also said that the model of masculinity that was raised in this kind of culture is exactly a destiny to the warfare. So it's a constant effort to dominate and destruct. However, I was lucky to study a lot, to travel in marvelous countries in which I learned other stories, as I was telling you, in which subjectivities that were not deprived of their practical access to experiment their fighting forces develop another idea of what strength is, singularly, and what strength is for. Expressing completely other physical direction and physical movements. And in 2 minutes, I will tell you a fantastic story that comes from Indonesia, another very interesting place, especially nowadays. People are really fighting against domination as well. But as I was saying before, there is an element that is very subtle in this division of weak body, caring bodies, and that are not allowed to fight, and strong bodies that are not allowed to be caring. And in this division, what happens is that, at least as I told you, in the experience of the culture I was raised in, that translates into an absence of a training for little girls or other feminized subjectivities to not experiment and never ever the possibilities not only to fight back. I don't want a kind of Far West in which people are just killing each other in that way, but just to experiment their possibilities of, for instance, setting boundaries. That is the space I'd like to have. That is the space I need for my body to what? To develop, to create the possibility to make your projects of life come true, becoming realities. And that is something that you really learned with physical experience. That is my belief, that we learned with the complexities of our system of mind, body, and emotion. And when we separate this part, something very bad happens to us. We lose the access to very powerful sorts of reflection and skills and ability. So, you know, there is now this phenomenon, for instance, the manspreading, especially in Europe, when you enter into a public space, a public bus. We know that men are generally trained to occupy as much space as possible. I would say better, to define the space with their bodies. And how we are taught to behave. Limiting, shrinking, always give space to. That is not a bad attitude, I'm saying. To be kind is a fantastic, also fighting force can be. But when you're not choosing it, you just have to accept this fact. It means that you are self-limiting with every single movement of your body and reconfirming a very patriarchal training to your not only bodily experience, but body, mind, and emotion experiences. And I will say, there is nothing to do with caring. Come on, if you, just give an example. If you meet a tiger that have, just give birth to their cubs, what do you think? That is so easy just to go her and caress her because she's a mother, she's caring, she's not going to attack me? I don't think so. Her fighting potential is at maximum exactly because she's in love with somebody. She has to take care of her cubs. And so I always say that the first access, the first most important things to enter in this realm of what I call another kind of strength or another gender of strength is to realize that a fight that is that is moved by love and kindness can be the strongest you can have. Also because it does not have this access element. It's not just about I will conquer and conquer and conquer and conquer, but it preserves the limits in which your strength is real, is possible, and is meaningful. That is to work with the totality of your body. And that is why also I don't like the term self-defense. To some extent, sorry. When it's said about, for instance, self-defense courses for women, I really do not believe in this kind of approach for two big reasons. First of all, it doesn't challenge this idea that we are not weak by nature. We are weakened. We are deprived of psychophysical possibilities. And I train a lot of women throughout the world and worked a lot with women who suffered from gender-based violence and other form of violence, with refugees. And always you have this trauma that is really written in bodies. That is like when you're just trying to say no, it's like your arm starts to tremble, to shake. Say, no, I can't. Why? It's just extending an arm. But what is beyond this movement, which kind of complicated socio-political system is going around that is literally blocking your arm in doing this. And so to learn how to regain this possibility is not to learn how to fight back. Because it's around 35 years that I'm practicing martial arts. I started very young. I was lucky in this. And I really do not think that my body is weak, and that, you can learn the best technique as possible, the most effective, but if you don't love yourself, if you are not, or what you are going to fight for, if you don't persuade that you can use it, you won't, never ever, when it needed. You will always stop in this. And we have many, many examples of this fact that when also very strong women, when attacked, for instance, by husbands or people who love them, cannot fight back, cannot refuse this. They just accept. But come on, you're strong. Why? Because of this, we have been trained culturally with I don't know how many tools, including fashion, including bodily images, including, I don't know, literature, songs, whatever. So it's definitely, many years that patriarchism is working on this. So I can say they did it well, from their perspective. But as I told you, it's not just, again, this idea of fighting back to learn something that can just pose a limit to this wrong, and then what? Again, start again in this, how could I say, process of self-limitation. The story of martial arts developed by inferiorized subjectivities is completely different. It's not something that is, this cockfighting, in which that is the masculine approach to the fighting system, that is just one has to win and to oppress the other. And this oppression means I am the man, I am the winning man. So it's a principle of subjectification. No, this other story is different. It's a story of liberation, of self-liberation, of gaining possibilities, not just fighting back, who cares? And what fascinates me the most is that the development of practices is related to this use of forces, and we will see by doing some exercise. Really, in 5 minutes, I will try to arrive to this point as soon as possible, because I know you are here especially to move your bodies, and that is also my desire as soon as possible. But what is important and why I'm telling to you these stories is because we need also to gain another perspective of what learning to fight is about for us. Is a way to reasoning starting from your body, is a way to asking, to consider your body as something not just meaningful, but wise, full of knowledge that we are always blocking. So it's like a vibrant matter that is telling us a lot of things that, for instance, there are not just two forces competing, but we can use a lot of different kind of forces. Why I'm saying this? When we think about, again, the monopoly of the virile, the male force, we think of forces about, okay, there is a force that oppresses me, that is directed in this way, in a linear way. So what I have to do to stop it, what I can do, is to use this, but this is another force that is just going in the opposite direction, but on the same line. And so I need to be as strong as this force, or at least something more, because it's the same level of force. What I have is a kind of, yes, I can contrast this force, but all my energies are involved only in this blocking moment. And what about the rest? What happens to the rest? That is always, I said, is, for instance, a good example of what was called the Cold War. Just limiting. And I have to admit, my Vietnamese friends always say, Cold was for you. In our countries, napalm was dropped on forests, on people, so it was not cold, it was definitely a hot war for us, and always depending on perspectives. But again, this is an energy, so again, we have just this linear way that is in principle always only destroying. So one time I can be the winner, the other time I can lose. But the result is always like this, oppressing. And what about other forces? But there is physics. Oh, sorry for giving you back. Okay, I will move there. So, okay. There are other forces. Physics already help us to think about forces in a different way. So physics tell me that when two contrasting forces meet each other, they can develop also other movements. Can you figure it out which kind of movements are there? Great. These are spiraling forces. Centrifuge and centripetal forces. It's like when two are meeting, I can move and creating spirals, vortices, waves, exactly like water did. And that gives rise to a completely different understanding of also fighting system when we need not to deprive of our bodies, but in the fighting, and not only to resist, not to fight back, but to fight for, and for us, gaining our center and starting to develop this kind of circular forces. And okay, we'll come to the stories and that to the movement. Okay, these two stories I will tell you. One, as I told you, is the myth of the origin of one fantastic martial arts of Indonesia that is a part of the Pencatsilat system, that is the martial art of Indonesia. One of the innumerable fighting systems developed by women, by indigenous women of Indonesia. And her story is about a fantastic woman. Her name was Rama Sukana. And Rama was going to wash clothes in the river. And when she was washing clothes, what happens? She saw a bunch of monkeys playing. And she was very interested in this. They say, oh, they are really have fun. And in this exact moment in which she interact with monkeys, monkeys arrive and try to catch her clothes. And she so started to resist to this and start this kind of game between monkeys and Rama. And she was so delighted, so amused, because she was learning something different. She was experiencing something different. And what was about? Fun, first of all. Possibility to spending her time doing something that she likes, but also defending something that was precious to her. And she was having so much fun that dawn arrived. And she had to run back to home because she had to cook for her husband, to do things. And so she was in struggle and said, okay, I have to run. And she ran back to home. And her husband was so disappointed and hungry because, I mean, it's so late and dinner is not ready. And he started to try to dominate her, try to push her back and trying to bite her. But this time, something new happened. Rama Sukana just started to play with him as she did with monkeys. And the result was completely different, because it was not oppressing her husband back, but was about completely blocking his movements, exactly as monkeys taught her to do. And at that moment, the husband realized how powerful those movements were, and the idea beyond those movements were the idea that, no, I'm not oppressing you. I don't want to kill you, to deny your humanity. I'm just fighting against the kind of oppressive force, the oppressive strength you are using. I don't want this to happen anymore. And from this moment on, everything changed in their life. And they have more equitable relations in the home. That is the story, at least. And the husband asked her to become his master, his teacher. So reversing the criteria of not domination, but of respect in the house, completely changing, transforming the kind of forces that were used in the country. That is Ramasukana, and the other small story is about something more historical, at least recorded, that happened at the beginning of the last century in Great Britain, when a bunch of women that decide this strange idea that women are also human beings that need to have rights, called suffragettes. Suffragettes are always depicted as, white middle-class women that have time to spend in this. Was not like this. Was about workers, oppressed women who had to suffer a lot, and it was the first time in which also a non-racist approach and the practice were developed, also in Great Britain. So we have to revise a little bit also the imagine that sometimes we have about the first moment of suffragism. And in this, what happened is that the oppression from the government was very, very hard. And in this, what happened is that, for instance, they were forced to prison a lot, they were beaten, they were raped by police, they were stoned by people and by police for their manifestation. So they have to rethink about their bodily protection. And what happened is that at that time, some people from Japan arrived and started to taught also to women a fantastic martial art that was called Jiu-Jitsu. Jiu-Jitsu literally means in Japanese the art of flexibility or the soft art. What is the idea beyond? Then I will give some reference, but I just want to focalize on this image that is so powerful. The image is that the person who created this art, that was a very weak man, a man with a lot of disease, once was in meditation and saw these trees covered by snow. We were in Japan, it snows a lot in winter. But all the trees that were strong and rigid, they just were broken. Their branches were broken because of the snow, because how the snow was heavy. Only one tree was not just resisting, but flourishing, and was a willow. The willow, why? Because the willow does like this. When something is very, strong, just release and come back. So this idea of to be strong can be to be flexible, to be adaptable. It's not about just a theory or something spiritual, it's physical. It is bodily. And he developed this martial art thinking about weak bodies that were considered weak. So for instance, to do a projection, that means to throw a body over your head, you need to be, for instance, smaller. So people who are smaller are more adapt to practice this kind of technique. So the principle was that there are not strong bodies or weak bodies in principle. There is just the kind of force that your body can perform. And so what we have to do is learning which force is mine, which garden, which territory is mine. Am I a small garden? Am I a desert? So I will use the force of fire, for instance. Who I am. And from this, starting to learn how I can use this force not to oppress, but to pose a limit to violence. And that is, the final. I do believe that there is a strong division between strength and violence. Violence is a form of strength, it's not all the kind of strength. And we have to learn how to be strong to limit violence. Why? Because it's not just about singularities. It's not just about our singular body. It's about collective bodies. The suffragists, from learning jiu-jitsu, that was something that they did collectively, not just alone, learn how to think differently about what is to fight and different strategies. So they start to develop different strategies, learning from the collective bodies they have, from their experiences. And so is exactly what we are going to do right now. Just having a sample, limited, expression for this, but to try to understand how we can learn that weakness can be a fantastic force, as water taught us. Water is untangible. We say judgment is not. There is a fantastic Taoist philosopher, Lao Tzu, who said that nothing is as weak as water, but when it arrives against rocks, nothing can limit water. So we have just to decide which kind of force we want to be, which kind of collective force we want to be, and train ourselves as singular and collective body to become the force we already are. Thank you. Now we stand up and start to practice.